Good morning, everybody. I am Salavalo, and I have been to every country in the world. And today I'm going to talk about how hard is it really to visit every country in the world, and what are the 5 things that you need in order to visit every country in the world. Now, if you're on social media, you've probably seen lately that there are tons of people going to every country in the world. It's a pretty common thing within the travel community to write down how many countries you've been to. A lot of people actively trying to get their number to the 193 or 196 or whatever number it is that they go after in order to say that they have been to every country in the world. You've recently had the first Black female, the youngest person, the fastest person, lots of different adjectives and exciting people who have made this journey. So I want to give you a little bit more of a look into what it takes to visit every country in the world, what you need, and how difficult it really is, and is it getting more easy, and who is it getting easier for. So I think that there are 5 main things that help you get to every country. So I'm going to take you through all of these now. So number 1 is money. Traveling is expensive no matter how you look at it, and traveling to every single country in the world is incredibly expensive. You often have airfare costs, you have to pay for hotels.
I have had such a good day, like going all around this hotel. The staff is super nice, the GM is super nice. Like, they have such an interesting goal to help the tourism in the country. Like I said, it's really interesting. I'm not sponsored at all by this. I didn't even tell them I was coming, like when I showed up and we started chatting.
You have to pay for your food.
Good. Not too spicy.
You have to pay for visa costs. You have to pay. Travel drains the wallet. But how much money do you really need to travel to every single country in the world? The answer is that it truly depends. I have friends who have visited every country on a budget of $10 a day, some who do it on $50 a day, some who do it on hundreds of dollars a day. I never calculated it myself. Most of my travel wasn't on a quest to visit every country, so I wasn't thinking about it. It was over a long span of time, so it's hard for me to calculate. Also, because I was traveling a lot for work, I didn't cover the expenses a lot of times. So I think that a good way to look at it is probably $1,000 a country. Sometimes this can be way less, sometimes it can be way more. So for example, once I spent 2 weeks in Guinea, so 14 days, and I had to pay, I think, like $50 a day for the hotel, and then I spent maybe $10 a day for food. So I ended up being in Guinea for 2 whole weeks for just under, maybe like $800 to $900. Another good example would be Rwanda, which I've been to 4 times, and I've done in very different ways. So the first time I went, it was in 2011. I was 20 years old, and I stayed in like a hostel. I traveled only by public buses. I entered and exited the country by land. So I ended up being able to be in Rwanda for around $20 or $30 a day. Third time that I went back, which was in 2017, I decided to stay at the nicest hotel in the country. I rented a car myself. I went and ate all of the best food that I could find. So I ended up spending, $300 or $400 each day that I was there in Rwanda. It really depends. I think that $1,000 per country is a good estimate. So, a minimum of around $200,000 is what it would take to go to every country in the world. But, that number can be lower or higher. But at the end of the day, we can't deny that money is an important part to all of these people that you see visiting every country in the world. They had to pay for it somehow. There are the few people who get different kind of sponsorships or social media assistance in order to visit every country in the world, and that's great. I think that they're looking at it then more as a job, and but of course there's still costs there. Somebody is paying, so it's money or access to money or finding funding from other people in order to get you to every country. The second thing that you need to get to every country in the world is time. There are 193 countries. It is a big number no matter the way you look at it. Even if you only would spend one day in every country, it's still something that requires 6 entire months. However, the quickest that anybody has ever visited every country in the world, I think, is this girl named Taylor, who did it in just over a year and a half, or just under a year and a half. I think that traveling that fast is, more of an idea of like record breaking. I personally had about an average of 1 week in every country. So, spread that over 193 countries, that's almost 4 whole years of traveling. It actually took me about 13 years. So my first country was in 2004 and my finale was in 2017.
193?
So that was 13 years to visit every country. Though it took me 13 years originally to visit every country, there has been a lot of returning in the past. So I looked back and I realized that from 2008 to 2019, so in those 11 years, I visited every country as well, because all of the ones from 2004 to 2008, I've returned to since. And so I guess in the past 11 years, I've been to every country. Obviously, that's more than a decade, but some people do it way faster, some people do it way slower. From when I was like 18 to when I was 25, I was visiting 10 to 15 countries a year, which is quite a bit. And I was working and I was studying full time. And then when I was 25, I left work and I took 2.5 years off, and I had already been to 115 countries and I finished the final 80 in those 2.5 years. I felt like that was traveling quite fast for me. So I did about 40 countries each of those 2 years. With the 193 countries, even if you traveled as fast as I did when I was full-time traveling, 40 countries a year, even 50 countries a year, you still end up taking quite a while to visit every country. Each person has their own journey. I think that however you want to travel is fine, however many days you want to spend. One way that I would shorten the amount of time needed is I would do combined trips. So I wouldn't just go to one country and come back. I would often, go to a region and see a lot of it, before I came back.
There's gonna be 4 countries in this quick 72-hour trip through Central Europe, but I'm actually only gonna be in Austria for like 10 minutes, 20 minutes. So I'm gonna go in and then go out at the next border to get back into Czech Republic.
There is also, of course, it's important when thinking about time to realize that there's a lot of places you'll want to return to. So even before I had finished visiting every country, I'd been to 50 or more countries twice. Now that number's around 80, I think. So, you're not just going to be usually going down the list and like checking it off. You'll often be traveling in different ways. The third thing that you need in order to visit every country in the world is a strong passport. If we're looking at how many countries are you required to get a visa ahead of time, so not on arrival, but that you actually have to go to an embassy ahead of time in order to get the visa, the number one passport currently is the United Arab Emirates, my home. So Emirati citizens only need a visa for 19 different countries. Only needing a visa for 19 countries is incredibly low. There's no other country that needs a visa for only 20 or less countries. So that's pretty amazing that the UAE has achieved that. One of the members of a royal family and one of our ministers, Sheikh Abdullah, worked really hard to get that done. So we're incredibly excited when that happened and when we finally were number one. A lot of the European countries, as well as North American, and then some of the like richer Australasian countries, so New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, Japan, South Korea, etc., they need a visa for around 26 to 30 countries. Now, of course, you can have a less powerful passport and still visit lots of countries, but it gets increasingly hard, a lot more time, a lot more money, and a lot more bureaucratic processes in order to get those visas. Of the 200 or so people who have visited every country, the only ones that I have seen that didn't have a passport from either North America, Europe, or one of the wealthy Australasian countries is one guy who did it from India and one guy who did it from Kazakhstan. So that's pretty amazing for them. You also have different people who talk about passport privilege in different ways. So depending where you're from, the passport is more powerful for the surrounding countries. So my friend Jessica Nabongo, the Catch Me If You Can.
Hashtag catch me in Gabon.
I did. I caught her.
She traveled with both an American and a Ugandan passport, which gave her some more freedom, especially in some countries that allowed entry on the Ugandan passport, but not the American one. So, of course, having multiple passports, combining where you can go is always useful. I did every single country on the American passport, although I have access to the German and Italian ones as well. The fourth thing that you need in order to visit every country is support. Nobody who does this does it alone. So I, for example, stayed with friends in 75 different countries. I also had a lot of support from my family, who I was always in contact with, always inspiring me to keep going and to be safe and to do well. There are countless strangers who have helped me. There are so many friends of friends and family of friends, and the followers on social media who were inspiring, who made me excited to do it. We also, as like a travel community, really support one another. I'm always giving advice to different people who want to visit every country. We give logistical support. We ask, hey, how did you get in here? Like, what's the situation like in this place? Is it safe, etc.? And so I really feel like you can't do this alone. The people who have tried to do this alone really have had a much more stressful time than those of us who kind of involved the community. And what you'll find is that though we're competitive travelers a little bit, we're also really, friendly with one another, and we try to make sure that everybody can do this as safely and as happily as possible. I think that for me, the first emotion that I felt when I finished every country was gratitude, because I realized how much of like a village it took in order to get me to every country. And yeah, I really don't think I could have done it without so much support from so many other people. So thank you to everybody for that. The fifth and final thing that you need to visit every country in the world is the desire to do it. Now, I think that you can go to about like 60 to 80 countries on accident. So I meet a lot of businessmen who, maybe take 1 or 2 vacations internationally a year, travel to different countries for business or for conferences, and a lot of them have been to around 60 to 80 countries, because there are around 60 to 80 countries that kind of like make sense, that people go to a lot. To get above 100, and then especially to get into 150 or more, that is when you really have to start trying. You don't go to every single Pacific island, every single Caribbean island. You don't go to the war zones of the world if you're not, kind of having a purpose there. And so you really need that desire, that drive to do it. I think that's what really unites this community of people who have been to every country, is that we set a goal and we went out to achieve this. And maybe we're, a little bit obsessive about it, or maybe we just like ticking off a number or seeing the number increase. Something about it makes us excited, gives us that desire to do it. And at the end of the day, it isn't like easy to do. And so you have to have a big desire that kind of pushes all of those difficulties out of the way and makes you want to do this.
It's too windy, but it's beautiful all around. 360-degree mountain views. Still got a long way to go.
So again, the 5 things that you need to visit every country: money, time, a good passport, support, and desire. How hard is it though to visit every country? It's incredibly hard. I mean, if you have all the time in the world, all the money in the world, a good passport, of course you can go out and do it. There's little standing in your way. Is everybody having a good time on the boat?
Yes!
Thank you, Matema.
I'm on the boat. Look at me because I'm standing on a boat.
It's like 2007 all over again.
Of course, if you had all the money in the world, all the time in the world, a good passport, good support network, and wanted to do it, you can. It isn't something that is very limiting to somebody who has all of those privileges. However, most of the world doesn't have all of that. People don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars that they can spend. They can't take a lot of time off work. Some people only get 2 or 3 weeks vacation or no weeks vacation at all. Most people in the world do not have the strongest passports, so it's very difficult for them to get all of the visas that are required. A lot of people don't have a support network generally in their lives, so to have support, to travel to every country, to have friends around the world to help you, to have, a social media following that pushes you and does it, that's hard. So a lot of people might have the desire, but all of those other systems don't exist in order to allow them to do it.
Hi!
Hello. Hello. More energy.
We feel like you should come to Bangkok, or we should go back to the village together.
Yes. The village. Let's go there.
We'll go back someday. Though Kylie's loving teaching in Bangkok. She'll be here for 4 years.
You're welcome. Karibu.
See you later. Have a good night being all Russian and cute. Give her a kiss.
I wish that anybody who wanted to travel to every country in the world could, because it was such an amazing experience for me. I learned so much. I met so many amazing people. It really defined this part of my life. But I know that it's such a privileged thing to have done. And so we need to be fully aware of that. That's why when you look at the list of people who have visited every country in the world, it tends to be older, wealthy, white men. And that's kind of indicative of the world generally, right? Who has the money, who has the time? It's usually not young people from poor countries, right? So of the 200 or so people that have visited every country in the world, probably about 10% of them, maybe like a maximum of 20, maybe as low as 10 women have done it. So there's clearly a bias in that. If 50% of the world is female, but only 5 or 10% of people who visit every country in the world are women. Of course, there are some advantages to traveling as women, but there's many more disadvantages. A lot of times you don't have that support, you don't have the safety. Women tend to have less wealth than men as well, so it can be more difficult, or their wealth is tied to others. They have more dependents, etc. Also, when looking at these 200 people, there are very, very few that are non-white, again, around 10 to 20. Obviously, the vast majority of the world is non-white. So, that's a huge kind of barrier for the people who might have a desire, but who can't get there. I already said that only 2 people had non-strong passports. Again, that's a huge barrier in order to do it. So I think that, as I've said in other videos, travel is a huge privilege. Traveling to every country in the world is an enormous privilege. So it is something that's hard to do. However, it's getting increasingly easy. The world is increasingly safe. The world is increasingly open. People are able to travel to more countries without visas than they were before. The world is also more logistically simple now. You can book flights to anywhere. You can contact people from anywhere and find out what the situation is on the ground. But still something that's hard. It still takes a lot to do it. So if any of you want to visit every country in the world, I hope that you will achieve it. I hope that I can help you in order to do that. So please reach out, comment down below, subscribe, follow me on Instagram or Facebook or wherever. Let's have that conversation. And I hope that you've enjoyed this and seen travel to every country in a little bit of a different way. And I hope that everybody will travel safe.